Barbara, we're on.
All right, thank you. Not according to here. Now we're on. Now we're on. Good evening, everyone. This is the Planning Board of Goffstown. Today is April 9th. Before we get going, I'm going to read a little announcement because, as you all know, we are still under executive orders regarding a state of emergency. So this board meeting actually has both in-person and electronic access. So as chair of the planning board, due to the COVID-19 outbreak and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, pursuant to executive order 2020-04, which has since been updated, this board is authorized to meet electronically. We are present here in Town Hall in our regular meeting room, but both members of this board and members of the public are authorized to participate electronically, in this particular case by telephone. We are using a telephone conference line for this meeting. The public has access to listen and, if necessary, participate. What happens when you call in? You're muted, and then if you have a comment, and that would be during public hearing, you press something and you, our administrator recognizes you and we unmute you to appear on the phone. You can dial 603-766-5646, and after you reach the conference call center, you're going to enter participant code 785645, followed by the pound sign. We've previously given public notice of this meeting and how to access it, and if anybody has a problem with accessing the meeting during our meeting, please call 603-384-3624. If someone is unable to attend due to electronic problems, we will reschedule it. Because we have members of the planning board attending telephonically, all meetings will be done by roll call, and with that, I'm going to ask everybody that is here to identify themselves as we normally do during our meeting. I'll start with the people who are here in the room. Tim.
Tim Redmond.
David Pierce.
Gail Lebrecht, alternate and recording secretary.
My name is Barbara Griffin, and if we can go to online, Joanne, why don't we start with you?
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
Peter?
Karen Hughes.
Karen? Karen is here as a regular member. Peter, are you here?
Peter Georgiantis, Selectman's Rep.
Is
Yeah, Philip Spencer.
Bill, are you here?
Yep.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the planning board present electronically?
This is Jim Raymond, I'm here.
Jim, thank you.
So Kimberly's absent.
Kimberly, are you
I'm trying to call in, but I don't know if anyone can hear me.
We can, Kimberly. Welcome.
Oh, good.
Barbara, they're all supposed to also mention if they have anybody in the room with them.
All right, and I don't know why this is a public meeting, but just for the record, are any of you in a room with other people for participating in this meeting?
I am not.
No.
Recognizing that you can't control family members, pets, or other things that might come into your way. So thank you, everybody, for identifying yourself. Is Sarah or anybody from Highway online?
Sarah's here.
Sarah, you're there?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and I understand that everybody who has just been identified is not muted, so that they can speak up at any time. The first item of business today will be our minutes. It would appear we have full attendance and presence and telephonically. So the roll call will be for regular members. And the first item on our agenda are the minutes of March 26, 2020. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve with correction.
Phil has moved to approve with correction. Is there a second?
I will second it. This is Pete.
Peter seconds it. Phil, your corrections, please.
Okay, page 8, middle of the page. When I asked a question about the capacity and the parking capacities and the parking. And Nick said, Nick's response here is Nick Golan said it will be predicated on the parking permit. It wasn't the parking permit, it was the approval by the fire department, because they would determine the capacity.
So predicated on fire department approval?
Right.
Does
So they
anyone,
would put the capacity on the on the structure.
right. Are there any other comments or corrections as to the minutes of March 26th? I'm seeing none, so I will call for a vote, and I will be calling members present in the room first, followed by online. Tim?
Abstaining, I wasn't present.
I vote yes. Peter?
Yes.
Karen?
I'm abstaining, I wasn't present.
Phil?
Yes.
Jim?
Abstaining, I was not present.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Thank you. Gail, is that a complete vote?
I've got 6.
Kimberly, Jim, Phil, Karen, Peter.
Karen. Got it.
Okay, we have it. I understand, Phil, you were reelected this term and you have been sworn in, is that correct?
Correct. Kathy Ball swore me in the other day at
Thank-
Town Hall.
Thank you, and Jim, you've been sworn in also? Jim? Is Jim Raymond still with us? Why I like these so much. All right, moving on. I have been informed that Jim has been sworn in, so I understand it's not an issue. We do have an issue in regards to appointments to committees at the beginning of the year. A planning board representative to the EDC, Tim Redmond, has graciously served in that capacity. Is anybody, including Tim, maybe interested in continuing that?
Yeah, I will.
Tim has indicated he would continue that. Do I have a motion to appoint Tim as the planning board representative to the EDC?
So moved.
Phil, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Karen,
Hughes.
Karen, thank you. That will require a roll call vote. Excuse me, I'm going off paper list. Tim?
Oh, yeah.
I vote yes. Peter?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, I'm sorry, I turned off my phone inadvertently, so I was sworn in too.
Thank you. And Kimberly?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Tim?
I would like to say on the record that I would like to see more members of this planning board be willing to step up and take these other positions. There seems to be a sort of a, other than Jim stepping up for CIP and myself for a long time, and there is Southern New Hampshire Planning, I know, but I would like to see some of the other members step up in the future and accept positions.
Well, and just so all board members understand, EDC meets once a month. Tim, in his capacity as CIP and EDC, has always been more than welcome to have other members come. I'm on Southern New Hampshire Planning. People are always welcome to come to those meetings. In electronic land now, it might make it a little more different. It certainly would be different, but just because someone has been appointed as a representative to a board, I don't want any board member to think that that precludes their participation in that task, and you will quite often find that the person who's been appointed would be more than happy to have you serve as an alternate or perhaps go to meetings on behalf of the planning board when they can't.
I don't want to see it go to the point where we have to have the chair assigning these on a rotating basis, because that would be the fair way to do it. I did wait long enough for someone else to speak up, and since no one else spoke up, I accepted the position.
All right, thank you, Tim. All right, I am gonna move on to the,
Excuse me, Barbara?
Yeah.
I just want to get on record, being a selectman's rep, I can't be on any other committees because we already have selectmen on those committees.
I understand that.
All right. So the reason for your silence and volunteering is notice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I am going to move on to the first item of old business. This is in regards to map 3, lots 47-1, 47-2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is a site plan review hearing for a proposal to add commercial ground-mounted solar arrays to those lots. Also being proposed is to do a lot merger, merging the lots in creating 3 separate lots. The property is located off Shirley Hill Road, Route 114. The property owner is Gentle Slopes Land Development, LLC, care of James McClellan, who is the applicant, is GSSG, New Hampshire LLC, located off Shirley Hill Road. This property is zoned commercial industrial flex. We have previously accepted this application. This public hearing has been continued from March 12th, 2020. So Joanne, you want to bring us up to date on this?
Yes, so the last time the applicant was in, as Barb had stated, was on March 12th. At that time, they had totally revised their plans from the previous plans that you saw. They're here tonight. They've addressed most of the staff comments. There's a few things that which we'll need to review. There is a lot merger which will be done afterwards. We've already received the paperwork, so it just needs signature if a plan does receive approval. That's on hold for the meantime. There are no waivers requested. The applicant is in receipt of the DPW template regarding the maintenance, the drainage maintenance agreement. So Sarah just needs to do the final review, so that was ready. And the other change, we did get a follow-up from the engineering office that the applicant was in contact with initially representing the abutter from Bedford, who was and Bedford Design did respond in an email that I did read, and they had no further comment. Moving forward, there's a question about whether or not the applicant will be reclaiming the shared driveway access, which is the paved area that David Valancourt spoke about. That property is actually a right-of-way for the benefit of the salvage yard. It goes over the land owned by the solar array company, or I should say Gentle Slopes. And that needs further discussion with the board. The applicant is prepared to have a discussion this evening about that. We have received comments from DPW. There are only 4 comments remaining on the list. Fire department comments have been addressed, and that's basically it. So the biggest issue currently is the driveway, and who's going to do what with it, and who's going to, whether or not anyone will make some improvements with it. The applicant will speak with the board on that issue.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Joanne before I go to the applicant to present any changes to the plan or what the plan is at this point?
If I could just say one additional thing, Barbara, you all should have a letter that you received by email, and also for those of you that are at the meeting, it should be on the table. It's a letter from NESG, and the title of it is Hebert's Used Auto Parts, and it's referencing Gentle Slopes, and it was received from Michael Redding, who is currently present with you.
Yes, he is. Okay,
Do you have your copy?
I do have my copy.
Do you have a copy?
All right, so at this time, I'm gonna turn the floor over to Michael Redding. Welcome. Do you have somebody participating by phone?
Yes, Sean should be on the phone.
Sean, are you on the phone?
Yes, I'm present. Can everyone hear me?
Thank you. Could you please state your full name for the record?
Of course. This is Sean Colella, project engineer with Novus Group. We are the site civil engineers for General Slopes Land Development and the solar application.
Thank you.
And I'm Michael Redding, representing GSSG New Hampshire.
All right, and Michael, do you have any plans for the easel, or because this is sort of a video electronic, you don't have any?
I have some plans, but if needed, I can put something up. But
Okay.
at this point, I wasn't anticipating that.
All right. Okay, so let me turn the floor over to you.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, as we finished up last time, as Joanne indicated, there were a couple of outstanding items. I'm going to ask Sean to go through that, and he addressed that mostly in his letter dated March 25th to Joanne. And then once he finishes up there, I can address the letter that I had sent off to David. So Sean, why don't you take over?
Of course. Sounds good. If at any point I become muffled or I'm inaudible, please let me know. I'm going to try and make this as brief as possible, as I know that this is a little difficult for everybody. So I'm going to go through the comments that were addressed by DPW/engineering. Starting with number one, we added a dimension to the closest corner of the existing building and actually blew it up in an inset to allow for better visibility. We provided a detail for the proposed vegetated earth berms. We incorporated the sanitary storm sewer detail per town standards, which has been revised on the detail sheet. Sarah received full drainage report analysis for 25, 50, and 100-year storms as requested, and it was incorporated into the stormwater management plan. We stabilized the emergency overflow for the permanent sediment basin along the proposed gravel access. The utility pole symbol was added to the legend on each of the plan sheets. Gravel, a 10-foot wide gravel access roads were extended to each of the proposed stormwater detention basins per the Goffstown development regulations. I believe, let's see, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, was the drainage maintenance agreement submitted or the driveway modification permit? I forget which one was submitted.
Excuse me, if I can interrupt, and Joanne, if you can help me. Are you referring to any things done since the plan submittal that we received? And the reason I ask that is my recollection was the package we got, Joanne, there was still some question about the access to all of the drainage easements, and what I just heard is that is now resolved and agreed to. Is that right?
The comments that you have in hand have already been updated based on Sarah's final review. So Sarah's final comments, numbers 1 through 4, are still, I guess you'd call it outstanding. They're not, I mean, they can be addressed conditionally, but those are the comments that are remaining since Sarah's last review of the drainage.
Okay.
Well, of everything, not just the drainage.
Okay, so Sean, in your meeting, in your presentation, you've started on page 3 of your letter, specifically in regards to the DPW comments.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize for the confusion.
No, well, that's what-
Thank you for clear.
That's what these meetings are, I think, much more difficult because of that, so I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Tim has a question. Tim?
Joanne, what were the questions 1 through 4 you're talking about, or the comments? Are they the ones we were already discussed?
If
So
you,
if you put the staff report, to the date,
page 5, David had it.
dated April 3rd, on page 5, you'll see in the center of the page, DPW/engineering comments. Those 4 comments are the remaining comments that DPW had on the latest set of plans that we've received.
Thank you for that, Joanne.
Excuse me?
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, so Sean, thank you. I think you were on page 4 of your letter. when I interrupted you.
Yes, that's correct. We're on page 4. We just, Michael can touch on the driveway modification permit in his discussion. What else? As Joanne discussed, we need fire department comments, and then the last discussion topic that I wanted to address and confirm is that we did in fact reach out to Bedford Design, as Joanne had previously mentioned, and I sent plans, full set of plans, and the stormwater management report over to Mr. Bob Baskerville, and he replied in an email that he had no additional comments. So we've essentially, I believe we've addressed that item as well. So those are the big ticket items, the changes from the last time the board has seen the plan set. So I don't have any more additional comments or changes to the plans. And then I believe Michael will address the driveway concern.
Okay.
If there are any questions, I apologize. If
Yeah,
there's
all
any
right, so
questions, I can-
why don't we keep the let's make sure that there's, no comments or if there are comments, let's address them for everything other than the driveway issue.
Perfect. The remaining 4 comments that Sarah had provided, Sean, do you want to review those and discuss those?
Well, why don't, just so we're all sure, so the comments were, and they have been suggested as conditions of approval for this site plan to us by Joanne, is that a drainage maintenance agreement will be required, and I believe Sean has said that a drainage maintenance will be submitted prior to the pre-construction meeting, and I think, did I hear Joanne, they've been provided our template?
Yes, that's correct.
The second condition has to do with the driveway.
Thank you.
The third one is the pre-construction meeting, and is that an issue for the applicant for the that's agreed to. And then the fourth condition is that a site inspection by the town or the town's representative paid for by the owner is required for general plan conformance, erosion control, and drainage. A final inspection will be required before a certificate of occupancy is issued, and an escrow payment will be made to the town prior to the pre-construction meeting. Sarah, is that an accurate reflection of the DPW's position in regards to a site inspection?
Yes, it is.
All right, I have a question, Joanne. And my understanding of all this is still very basic after all these years. Why does somebody putting up a solar panel get a certificate of occupancy?
Well, it's just like if someone were to, for instance, make modifications to a parking lot or something like that. It's not so much that they probably don't get an actual certificate, but all of the departments sign off on it before they can actually operate.
Okay, so we're not expecting Mark to go out and do
No.
construction review of this project, because this would be beyond the scope of what he would normally do as a building inspector.
Correct.
So the certificate of occupancy, so it's clear on the record, refers to a sign-off that everything has been completed in accordance with the plan.
Correct.
Okay.
I did leave one where it says on page 6 where it says suggested conditions for approval. I did forget to add driveway modification permit required. So if you get to that point this evening, I made a note to add that as a condition.
All right, which goes to our driveway discussion. Is there any further discussion on this? I will, before we get to the driveway, I guess what I'd like to, Tim, do you have a comment? Tim, please.
Normally, we require an as-built drawing certified by the engineer of record when the project is complete prior to any final issuances of COs or such, and that's not in the notes. Should that not be included in our notes for condition of approval?
I would refer that question to Sarah, since there are no
Yeah.
actual buildings. It would be her preference.
I think, yes, we should add that.
So what's the proposal to add, Tim?
And as-built drawings certified by the engineer of record that the project was installed as in accordance with the plans submitted, and prior to issuance of any permits to operate.
All right, well, then I have a question for Sarah then. Then what's the escrow payment for if they're gonna pay for a third-party as-built certification?
Escrow is for inspections during construction to make sure their erosion control is installed, that they installed upon the shown plan, and then finally to check to make sure that what is shown on the plan has actually been installed at the site.
Okay,
Drainage and,
yeah, no, I just wanna make clear, because we just added something that involved dollars. Tim?
so I have a question for Mr. Redding. There is going to be wiring and such here. Who inspects these elements of a solar farm? Is there any governmental inspection of the facility itself prior to being put online with public service?
Certainly, the all electric has to be done under the supervision of a licensed electrician. And then for certain elements of it, your building inspector will want to see some of that. But for the most part, anything that isn't like a direct connection to underground or something like that where it goes away, there wouldn't be a necessary inspection for that. So a lot of the main terminals get inspected. The casings around the transformers get inspected. Final terminations between underground and above ground get inspected. And again, that's all very typical for an electrical inspection. So if the town inspector couldn't handle it, we've worked with the state inspector, and that can be a resource that he can draw upon, that's, at the town's disposal.
I just want to make it clear for the record that we talked about the building inspector not being involved because there's no actual CO, but there is an element that the building inspector will have to look at, so that should be, the board should be aware of that fact.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or comments on the non-driveway portion of this plan?
Barbara?
Yes, Phil?
Just to follow up on the electrical, when it was mentioned about the electrical connections where it goes out, is there inspections, and he mentioned state inspector, if it was necessary? I guess I'm not clear on what portion is the town building inspector going to be inspecting. What portions are somebody else? Because this is not something that a typical building inspector encompasses on a regular basis, this type of electrical connections. So I'm just wondering, when he mentioned the state inspector, are there inspections by Eversource that have to be met? I'm just not sure how those inspections are kind of spelled out.
Sure. So, yes, there are inspections by Eversource. There's inspections that would be typical under the town standards for electrical connections of this type. As far as the kind of complexity that you're referring to, a lot of that gets handled by Eversource and the licensed electrician. So it doesn't really get into the town building inspector doesn't really have to get involved. Where we find that the building inspector provides value is verifying that conduits that are underground are in proper conduit types, that any sort of above-ground piping is protected and in accordance with the National Electric Code, and that any sort of terminations that go to a cabinet are verified, meeting the right cabling and the type of enclosures. So it's not too complicated that a building inspector with the town couldn't handle. And like I said, I offered just that in the case that there was something that he had questions about, the state inspector is quite familiar with these systems and could offer advice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing for comments in regards to the plan other than the driveway, because I'd like to hear from people in regards to the design and what work has been done in regards to the actual placement of the solar array and the access and the drainage. If you are online and you would like to speak to this, you should hit *9, and the administrator will unmute your phone, and we will be able to hear your comments. So if you are here and you'd like to make a comment on something other than the driveway, I'm gonna open it up for the driveway after we talk about the driveway. But I wanna make sure we sort of deal with the sort of functional part of the solar array proposal separately from the driveway. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak in regards to this portion of the plan? All right, I'm not hearing anybody, so I'm gonna suspend the public hearing at this time. We'll reopen it after the driveway. All right, so this has a driveway on property owned by the applicant that is shared.
If I can just make one point.
Sure.
The applicant doesn't own,
Oh, the applicant is not the owner of the
because we're a
property, I'm
leasee.
sorry.
Yep, we're just leasing the land, yep.
Okay. But it's an easement to the business that uses the access.
Correct.
And a driveway modification permit, by the way, Joanne, is on your conditions. It's number 2.
Oh, I'm blind, thank you.
So the issue came up in our last meeting about the condition of the driveway and what could be done. Joanne, do you have any updates as to that discussion?
So, like I said, I have the update that we've received from the applicant is his letter dated April 6th, where, I guess to sum it up, is that they would not be offering to do any improvements to the current paved area unless there were damages, and I think it's on the second page. They say that they would be willing to share in the costs for a new driveway in whole or in part if damages from their construction activities were greater than $10,000. They would contribute 50% of the total cost of replacement up to a maximum of $30,000. I don't know if Mr. Redding has had conversations with Mr. Valancourt. I have not heard anything from Mr. Valancourt at all. He was at your meeting back in early March.
Right, no, I know, so I just want to make sure we understand what we're talking about. And Mr. Redding, if you could, on the plan, tell us what plan sheet would be best to look at to see the driveway for the portion that we're talking about.
The best sheet is C 3.3.
3.3.
Madam Chair,
Yep,
just to make a point for people that are on TV and can't, the letter is from, it's to Heber's Used Auto Parts that's being referenced, that's dated the April 6, 2020, and there's no CC to the town, but this is a letter from the applicant to Heber's that we're discussing.
right, well, right now, I want to discuss the actual plan sheet C33, because, and the reason I ask that is, the road is admittedly not in great shape, it's been patched, but we really didn't talk about that section of the road except in gross, and I went out and I looked at it, and there are 2 culverts underneath the road there that appear to be sort of obviously contributing to some of the degrading of the road surface that has been patched. And it appears that there's a fair amount of water flow that came through there. So I was not sure exactly what was there. And I think, Sarah, somebody has been able to go out and take a look at it. So I have a lot of concerns about not only the road surface, but what might happen to the culverts in regards to that. So could the applicant, and whether it's Mr. Redding or Mr. Colella, I think,
Correct, yep.
can answer, these are pretty big panels that come in on trucks. What is your estimate of the truck trips and the weight that will be coming into that site? I think we talked about that last meeting too. We talked about the size of the panels, and it would be a fair amount of traffic, maybe only one time, but a fair amount. Does anybody have any idea what we're talking about?
Sure. Why don't I address it, and then
Okay.
Sean, if you want to jump in. I'd like you to look initially at C 2.2.
Okay,
So C 2.2 shows the intersection of the existing paved driveway as it intersects Shirley Hill Road.
right,
Okay, so that paved section begins there and goes all the way up to the point where we're showing our new gravel access drive. So what we're really talking about is that paved section that Mr. Valencourt brought up last time, that he was concerned that our construction activities would further degrade the condition of the road. So, if it would be all right, I'll just dive into my letter and answer your question as a course of that discussion, or would you like me to answer your question about trucks first?
why don't you answer my question about trucks, because I know that's not in the letter.
Okay, so the solar panels that will be delivered are not extremely heavy. I don't have an exact weight for you as far as what that tonnage would be. It would be fairly, you could say comparatively lighter than what you would expect for like a building or major construction, because the panels are, to give you a perspective, when they arrive, they are staged, brought to the location where they're going to be installed, and people just physically handle them and put them onto the racking system. The racking system is typically a light gauge galvanized steel, very, relatively thin, but the way that it's constructed gives it a tremendous amount of strength. Again, not offering a lot of weight. When the trucks arrive, it'll probably be, with this size of an array, it'll probably be, I'm going to say 3 trucks bringing, tractor trailers bringing the panels, and then maybe 2 trucks bringing the light gauge steel that would follow. We'll have to locate that in a spot on our leased area and provide for the proper maintenance of that. But in comparison to the wreckers and the others that come through there with Hebert's Auto, there's some comparison to the weight depending on how many
Right.
vehicles he's receiving. And so I don't think that we're tremendously larger than what the road would maybe see.
You're talking approximately 5 truck trips, not more than 5. 3 trucks.
For the
per
major deliveries, yes.
panel. Tim, did you have a hand up?
Yes, I do. I think we're overlooking a different element of this project, the construction of the new gravel access road that's gonna have to be built all the way to the site, including the turning areas and the access to the solar sites. Those are gonna be construction trucks loaded with gravel and crushed materials, so
Okay.
we're talking a lot of heavy truckloads coming and going. I don't know what the calculation is for cubic yardage or tonnage for that project, but the tractor trailers with the panels is the least of the concerns. They should be more concerned with the construction traffic to build the road.
Okay. Mr. Colello, do you have any idea what kind of traffic you're talking for that?
I don't at this time. I haven't done the calculations.
Okay. All right, thank you. So, Mr. Redding, then why don't we talk about the section that we're talking about that needs
The
to,
paved section, certainly, yes. So, I wrote this letter, I sent it off to David, I included Joanne in my email, that I sent this to him. It included a picture, a drawing that showed pictures of the pictures of the pavement
Pavement,
that have been
yeah.
patched, yep. And so just to kind of start some sort of kind of photo representation of what the concern is. And it's completely valid. Mr. Valancourt and I had, I felt, a very good conversation. He reviewed the letter. He thought that it characterized the condition fairly well. We both recognized that the construction activities could certainly weaken or exacerbate the current conditions. He acknowledged that he's been working to try to extend the life of the road. It was paved about 20 years ago for the sole purpose of his business. He's been trying to avoid, I wouldn't say avoid because he didn't use those words, but he's been trying to extend the life of the driveway by patching it, which is an absolutely reasonable way to go about it. We acknowledge that there are some areas where what are called kind of alligator cracks. So they look like the back of an alligator. That's why they call them that. Those areas, to me, have the highest potential for further weakening, and they break up, the chunks of asphalt come out, and you can create issues. So we talked about those. He agreed that, that he thought that those might be areas that he wants to patch before the construction starts, something that we wanted to continue having a conversation about. And then after that, we talked about how we were going to do some means to try to prevent any sort of impacts to his existing patches using steel covers or anything of similar nature, similar to the crossings where the culverts are. We could use steel plates to bridge that gap to offer added strength to those elements. And then once the construction was complete, we would review it together along with the town's engineer and determine what areas may or may not need to be repaired. As we outlined in the letter, we're proposing to make these repairs. Certainly, if we are completely a direct cause, then we will make those repairs. And so if those repairs result in greater than $10,000, it's largely because the driveway is just in need of a much more greater repair. So we agreed that, the use here is certainly shared. We're both benefiting from this easement that we will both have over this land. And that though our use will be lesser for the long term, we recognize our short-term construction use. And so we're agreeing to contribute up to 50% for the total cost of a replacement that may include the whole driveway or portions thereof. David and I discussed that. He looked at the proposition. He felt that the money being allocated was appropriate for the needs of the driveway and felt that it was fair based upon the condition of the driveway and our use. So I told him about the meeting and hopefully he can speak to the letter
Yeah, I'm sure.
in that regard.
I'll have him speak. Sarah, did anybody from Highway go out to take a look at this? Because I think certainly the entrance to this driveway is probably a town issue at the very entrance, because we're gonna be reconstructing that road this summer, and there'll be some sort of a tie-in that happens there. So did DPW have any opportunity to take a look at it?
Eric did go out and look at it, and he reported that it wasn't in great shape. He said the worst parts of the road were well off the road, so DPW typically wouldn't look at that unless it is part of the project.
Okay.
But he did say that it didn't look great right up against the edge of the road. I'm not sure of any project where we've made that a condition in the past, but typically we would go take pictures before construction started and then talk to the applicant if they really damaged the edge of the road and not give them a certificate of occupancy until it was fixed.
All right, I just know that you're gonna be reconstructing the road. I think maybe you stop before that section, but I know that road's gonna get worked on this summer. Tim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I concur with Sarah. I think the town should be responsible for the portion within the town right-of-way, and I think anything beyond that should be an agreement between the applicant and Hebert's.
All right, I raised the issue because of the water flow that goes through under there, and it was well, the water flow, normally for a driveway modification permit, we would require that, we just had an applicant on private property 2 meetings ago in regards to making sure that water flow continued. Sarah, was there any concern about the culverts? And I don't think there was, but was there any?
I don't have any records of them being designed, so I cannot speak to their sizing. Eric did mention that they were unsupported, so they didn't have head walls or flared end sections. It was kind of like they were dug up, a pipe was laid down, and then the road or driveway was built over it, which I'm sure we'd find plenty of that all over town.
Okay. Okay,
They did have enough cover, which suggests they should be able to handle the weight load of trucks going over them.
I'm just concerned that absent the private agreement, given the amount of water flow, if there's a problem with the culvert, it will become the town's problem. Because the water, because your wetlands were at the other end, not this end.
Right, so if for some reason that culvert was the plug, it would likely pool behind that driveway and then overtop the driveway and create problems for access. So it would immediately become our problem
Okay,
to be able to just access our land.
okay.
And the way that I've left it with David is we have this letter, he's acknowledged it, we're gonna meet prior to construction to continue the conversation here. And we've agreed to be, partners in making sure that that driveway stays at a certain level of service that is reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Joanne, did I hear you?
Barbara, the fire department also requires that the driveway or site access has support, has to be able to support the fire apparatus vehicles.
And I think we heard from Sarah that they feel that the culvert has that capacity at this point.
Well, so then I go back to sheet C33, which is the issue for the culvert. I don't know that did we have any specific data in regards to the culvert? Because that was not part of this plan design. So I wouldn't have
Correct.
expected to have any detail for the culvert. So is the statement on the record that because we expect it's going to be able to support the fire truck, that it will be supporting them afterwards? I'm a little concerned about the amount of heavy traffic, as
Gotcha.
Tim, that we're
Gotcha.
gonna end up with failed culverts, that in fact, because there was never probably a driveway permit or whatever back then that addressed it.
Right.
That we're now gonna have a plan that's approved, and we're gonna have problem culverts that the fire department is gonna want to be able to
Okay.
pass over. That's my concern.
Well, would it be acceptable to the board then, in addition to us doing this pre and post assessment and monitoring during the construction, that we include, in addition to the pavement, the culvert?
Yes, thank you.
Then we are acceptable, we would be willing to take on that
Okay, Tim.
responsibility.
And in the absence of comments from Mr. Valencourt in the public hearing tonight, I would request that Mr. Redding get a signed copy of his agreement with them to submit for the record, so that Mr. Valencourt has agreed to it, and it is not just your representation. Thank you.
Great.
And Barbara, if I could just add one thing.
Yep,
Staff and I, DPW staff and I discussed this, and we felt it might be a good idea to have as a condition that the two owners come up with a maintenance responsibility agreement, because moving forward, 10 years from now, when there's a problem with that road, there's nothing that says who's responsible for it. So it might be a good idea to get that as part of this approval.
Tim,
I disagree with that, Joanne. This is private property. We can only ask them to construct the driveway to the standards that we've set forth. And beyond the acceptance of the driveway and the project completion, I think the town should not be involved in any long-term maintenance agreements of that road. That's their issue, their land, their agreement. I would vote against a maintenance agreement.
My suggestion would be not for the town to get involved, but for the town to require an agreement between the two parties that we have a copy of, because if, for instance, something happens to that driveway, the fire truck will not be able to access.
Well, that's their liability. They accept like any driveway or any private piece of road in the town of Goffstown. If I don't maintain the culvert in my own driveway and the fire truck can't get in, then that's my problem. So I suggest we leave it to them. I don't really think we're within our bounds to require that they have an agreement between them. They already have an easement agreement, and that's their business, not ours.
Yeah, it would be similar to like a shared driveway and discussing who's gonna snow blow or plow the section where we meet. And that's what David and I have already started. We've got, I think, a fairly good conversation going that I'm confident will continue.
Other members of the board wish to make a comment as to the driveway issues? Seeing none, and if, just for the record, if a board member decides that they need to leave the meeting, if they can just let us know before they exit the meeting. All right, at this time, I'm going to reopen the public meeting, the public hearing. We'll, of course, take comments on anything in regards to this plan. This plan is map 3, lots 47, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 through 10. And if you're online and you have a comment, I ask that you hit *9, and you will be unmuted by the administrator helping us with this meeting. Is there anybody here who would like to make a public comment at this time in regards to this plan? There's no member of the public here present in the room. Is there anybody online who would like to make a comment in regards to this project? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. Board members, we have on page 6 of our town administrator's report suggested conditions for approval of this site plan. Tim, we talked about a couple of other things that were going to be added to it. Do you have them?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that I think that in conjunction with number 4 from engineering, DPW engineering, about the site inspection, that we would require a certified as-built drawing that would be certified by the engineer of record when the project is complete, that it has been built in accordance with the submitted plans. Was there another one? I only had that one.
Would that be added to number 4 or become
That would be an
number,
extension
or
of.
number 11?
That'd be an extension of, well, it has to go to the site approval, yeah.
Site inspection and approval.
But, has that been, yeah, it'd be number 4 on page 6 for the suggested conditions of approval of plan. You would just add that language to the number 4, because it just goes along with it.
And then I think in regards to number 2, which Joanne had mentioned, the driveway modification permit had been required from DPW. The applicant has offered, and I think for purposes of the file, that the agreement on the paving of the access portion of it would be submitted to the town for the file in regards to, with Mr. Valencourt, what your agreement, so if this is your agreement, we'll get a copy of it, so
Right.
we know what it is.
Yeah, that goes with,
would replace item 5.
I think that's in addition to item 5, right?
Well, no, because their point is, they're not necessarily going to reclaim it.
Oh, I see. But at least,
You're right, it would be a replacement of,
but it is a signed document by both parties that
Right.
they both agree to it.
so 5 would become the submission of a signed, agreed to plan as to the specifics of
Assessment and,
Current.
yeah, say assessment and repair if necessary.
the current pavement.
Correct.
The shared access.
Board members, other comments on this plan?
I'm good.
Anybody else?
I'm good.
All right, well, we've heard this plan now a couple of times, dramatically different than the first application we had.
Thank you for your patience.
It would appear that planning staff is recommending approval, subject to conditions. Do I have a motion?
Before you do that, Barbara,
Yep, Tim?
the fire department comments noted on page 5, did they need to be moved into, any of those need to be moved to conditions of approval?
No, they've already addressed them on the plans.
Thank you for that.
The letter that Mr. Colello did address them.
Make a motion, we approve with conditions.
Second.
Tim, do you have a detail of what changes to the conditions as recommended by the director that we're doing, the planning director? Gail, do you have them?
You want me to tell you what they are?
Yeah. Gail, why don't you tell us what you think our changes are?
To the conditions, it's the as-built drawing certified by the engineer of record, to be submitted prior to the issuing of the permits. And we have the signed agreement to the plan, as to the, I can't read my own writing, the assessment and repair of the pavement.
Of the current pavement?
Current pavement, yes.
And that will replace 5.
Right.
Does anybody have any other conditions? Seeing none, there's been a motion made to approve. I think, was there a second?
Yeah, I second it.
Thank you, Phil. I thought there was one. It's hard to remember when everybody's not right in front of you. Is there any further discussion on this motion? We have a motion to approve with conditions, map 3, lots 41, 2, 3, 4, and 6 through 10. I'm gonna call for a vote. Tim?
Do we have to include the fact that they have the lot consolidation thing later on, or is that not?
Joanne, I understand the lot consolidation will be a separate item, correct?
Correct. The board doesn't need to approve the lot merger. I can sign off on those, but they wanted to hold them aside until the board actually approved the site plan, because if the site plan was for some reason denied, they did not want to go through with the lot mergers.
Understood. So there's nothing that needs our approval in regards to the lot mergers?
Correct.
Okay. All right, now I will call for a vote. Tim?
I'm in favor.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. You're all set. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next item before us tonight will be Mast Road Crossing. This is the parcel across from what we refer to as the Villa on Mast Road. Jennifer McCourt will be attending on behalf of Mast Road, and I'm calling her for coming in now.
Since I'm not a voting member tonight, I don't need to, I'm recusing myself on this. I'll stay where I am.
Pretend you're on the phone. Good. Head on down to the last door, Jennifer. We've got things sort of reversed here to do it this way.
It's okay. The wind is brutal out there.
Is the wind picking up? They said it was
I
gonna get,
almost didn't make it in. This was like a sail.
That's good, it's gonna dry the ground out tonight.
all right, while you get set up, Jennifer, I'm gonna start doing our thing, all right?
Sure.
This is an item of new business here tonight. While this may seem like it's not new business, because the applicant has been here before, this is in fact a new application. This is in regards to map 5, lot 60. This is a completeness review relief from the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland surface water conservation district buffer, and a site plan subdivision review application of Mast Road Crossing LLC owners. This is located at South Mass Street, Mast Road. It is a proposed 42-unit condominium development for 55 years and older that will be partially located within the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland surface water conservation district buffer. The proposal is to build 19 duplex units and 1 fourplex unit building. The property is zoned commercial industrial flex zone and is located in the wetland surface water conservation district overlay. This was actually continued from the February 27th meeting. The application has not yet been found complete. There are some waivers requested. Members should have that information in front of them in regards to the lighting requirement, school impact fees, closed drainage system, and infiltration pond access. Joanne, is this application complete?
Complete? Yes, it is.
Okay. And is there a recommendation as to regional impact?
There is no regional impact. I would suggest that the board request that the applicant waive the 65-day clock, just in case we need to.
Well, I mean, I think if it's complete, we need to accept it. I'm a little worried about all time provisions are sort of waived at this current time, so I'm not really sure what clock we're waiving at this point. Jim?
Once you've accepted it as complete,
Yeah,
and you have 65 days to approve it, is that clock waived as well?
I don't know. Jim, do you have an opinion on that?
I believe it is.
Yeah, I think they're all sort of waived right now.
I'll look it up while we're talking.
Okay, Tim?
So I'd like to make a motion to find the application is complete and ready for review with no regional impact.
Second.
And is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Tim?
Yay.
I vote yes. Peter?
Yes.
Karen? Phil?
Yeah.
Yes.
Jim? Jim's looking things.
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
The application is accepted. We do have the issue in regards to waivers. Do we need to accept those for purposes of discussion and acceptance only?
I make a motion to,
Grant the waivers for acceptance?
yeah, grant the waivers for acceptance purposes only.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Tim?
Yes?
I vote yes. Peter?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Joanne, why don't you bring us up to date with what we're looking at?
Okay, so as you mentioned, this plan has been before the board a few times, but it's never been accepted as complete. Jennifer McCourt is here this evening to review the changes that she has made. She realizes that there are still items to be discussed and worked on. However, she would like the opportunity to present her plan, new plan, and have some discussion about certain items with the board. I believe she has some people on the phone. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Yes, I do. The client, Norris Viviers, is on the phone. The traffic engineer, Steve Perna, is on the phone, and the attorney, Dan Mueller, is on the phone.
Gentlemen, can you all introduce yourselves, please, for the record?
Norris Viviers here.
Thank you.
Dan Muller here.
Thank you. Steve Purnell, you there? I'm not
I
here.
hit star 9. Can you hear me?
Is that Steve?
Yes.
Yes, it's Steve. Could you state your name for the record?
Stephen Perno.
Thank you very much. So, gentlemen, I can hear you all. So we'll have Jennifer lead the discussion, and we'll have you cut in as the discussion goes forward. Thank you. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I guess one question for you before I start. Do you want me to start from the beginning, or do you want me to do like a really brief overview and get into the issues?
Just a brief overview again.
Okay, as many of you know, we're on South Mass Street and Mass Road. It's a condominium project with two areas of the condominiums because the project split by Dan Littlebrook. Since the last time I really think I presented this to you, per DOT's comments, we eliminated the Norman Road intersection, so the Villa Lane only has one access point. In doing that, we got a bonus in being able to minimize the impact to the outer 50-foot wetland surface water setback. Then we have the other side here that still has the loop road where we're using the driveway that goes out to Angel Point as one of the access points from Mass Road, and then coming back where this entrance is across from one of the Village Augustina's driveways. So going through that, I'm gonna just, to try to keep things easy, go through Joanne's review because it's fairly complete, and do you want me to go through the waivers now, or?
Just briefly, it's my understanding that that this plan is gonna be continued tonight to a date certain. Is that the applicant's understanding, or?
I mean,
is-
we'd love to get it approved, as you well
Okay,
know, but it's just, I think
with
there's.
2 pages of, with the number of comments that are here.
The thing is that a lot of these comments, like, there's one page on well, actually more than one page on one issue, regarding one of the waivers, which is the, impact fee. And a lot of these is just more explanation, because a lot of these comments are just more explanation because it's such a complicated project. It may be continued, but I'd like to try to get through as much of this as possible so that the next time we can bring in a final plan, because I really think we're at that point.
If I could interrupt before you get any further, can you hear me?
Joanne, go ahead.
So you all had a copy in your packet of the staff report. You should have found another staff report on the desk or the table when you came in. Please use that one. There's some red highlighted changes that I made, the most recent. Those of you that are participating by phone, I emailed that to all of you, I think it was like 2 days ago.
Yeah, Joanne, when you say red highlight, all of the suggested conditions of approval are red highlighted.
No, that's the chair's agenda.
Oh, okay.
This is just it's a separate pack of maybe, 11 or so pages.
It looks like our regular report.
It's just the staff report for this application.
The corners of the pages are not numbered like a normal staff report.
Okay, I'm just not
Correct.
finding mine, okay. David's coming, oh, maybe there's one right here,
Yes,
okay.
maybe?
It's the staff
It's that,
report.
it's, It's the chair's agenda? Oh, no, I don't have that.
What
Okay.
she wrote in
Oh.
red, I highlighted in yellow.
Okay, thank you. All right, I've got it now.
Okay, thanks, sorry about that.
Okay, so we have the packet that is in front of me, and you've got, what is the red supposed to mean to us?
The first red starts on the third page. Those are the updated comments to the one that were initially included in your packet. So there's not very many changes, but I just want to make sure you're looking at the correct comments.
I have to admit, I'm completely confused as to why I've got a different package tonight, but, let's try and go through it.
Madam Chair?
Tim?
In regards to the waivers, I wouldn't mind if the applicant would give us an overview of the request,
Yeah, before we
Why-
get into
why
the
the re-
details, maybe we
just
need
the-
to address the waivers.
just so you can explain why you're asking for the waiver.
Absolutely. The first waiver is regarding the requirement to have a closed drainage system, which is Appendix C, Section 4.A. And the proposed new roadways drainage systems must be closed drainage systems. Water is to be channeled into the drainage system through curbing or berms. In rural areas, asphalt berms will be allowed. Adequate treatment of the runoff must be provided before the runoff leaves the site. Multiple times we've talked about this site. This whole area here is relatively flat, and believe it or not, this area here is even flatter. And when I did have the road coming through here, because I had to get a culvert underneath the road, I was impacting the water surface setback a substantial amount, about 40 feet, to be able to outlet that pipe. To put curbing on here and putting in catch basins, I would not, because the is so flat, I would be impacting probably the inner 50 feet to be able to outlet it, and then I have to treat it. So then I'm putting treatment within that area also. On top of that, when this project went to New Hampshire Natural Heritage Bureau, it came back with 3 species of endangered species. And you have in your packet a email from Kim Tuttle from Fish and Game. The second paragraph says, "No catch basins in conjunction with straight granite curbing, as these are a source of entrapment and exposure to the collection and vehicle collision. Cape Cod's asphalt or sloped granite is okay, but she recommends that no sumps in the catch basins, in grass area, and other exterior development be removed, and just use catch basins so that the wildlife can go through and doesn't get caught." So for quite a few environmental reasons and just practicality, we were looking at just putting culverts underneath the driveways and then outletting to, I mean, this is just an infiltration pond. And, because this whole area right here has no outlet. It doesn't go anywhere. And this one won't go anywhere. This one I made because I did, trying to make everything drain a little bit. This barely drains behind units 1 and 2 until it gets into a larger detention pond. And then its outlet is just a cut in the berm. It's not even a culvert. So that, you know, because I couldn't get cover over the culvert to be able to do it. It's a very shallow detention pond. Same thing on the other side. I do have some relief here, but most of this is the same thing. working very closely with Public Service on their easement here. I barely got this outlet down here on this one to work. I almost had to get an easement from Public Service to go into their property a little bit, but I just barely got those grades to work. Another issue is that in speaking with the fire department, because people do park on the sides of the roads whether you like it or not, and with the granite curbing, it makes it very tight when the fire trucks or first responders are trying to get in through there. You can see by the traffic, the truck movements that I did, which is the very last page of the set. Got a bigger version, I know it's in color. There are some tight spots at the intersections with Mass Road and South Mass Street where it's this one here and this one here getting in is where, if there's somebody parked there being dumb, it's gonna be even harder for a fire truck to get in there. So, and adding curbing there is just gonna exacerbate the problem. So that's why we're asking for that waiver for multiple of reasons, for environmental topography of the land.
Tim?
Just
I'm
general
trying to
safety.
find the email you're referencing from Fish and Game. I can't find it in my packet. Anybody else find one?
I looked and I could not find it. Is it part of your letter?
It was part of the waiver. It was from September 10th, 2019. It was submitted in with the application.
Well, it must not have made it, because all we have is a number 3 for the waiver request you're making.
Oh,
And it's not even, it's just closed drainage systems, Appendix C, Section 4A. I don't have anything to go with it, so.
If you look, there is an application that says 10 wide gravel, and what I have stapled to that is actually the closed drainage system.
But not the letter from the
No
Fish
letter
and Game.
from the Fish
yeah,
and
because you should have had one waiver request. The waiver request that has this was the one that I submitted back in December 24th.
That's why we don't have it.
That has 3 of the waivers on
Yeah, if you
it.
submitted stuff with that plan and it didn't come in with this plan, I suspect none of us have it.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to get copies of that.
Because this was, I think, treated by planning as a new plan.
No, because I submitted in December 24th. They reviewed it, and then I submitted in new, instead of coming before you, because there was comments that had to be taken, we just extended it out so I could address those comments. The new one was December 24th, not the not the March 6th or the March 27th submittals.
Okay.
So we've been.
Joanne? Is anybody online, or Joanne, do you have the material that Ms. McCord is referring to that we don't seem to have here?
I'm looking. The plans that were submitted in December were never seen by the board because there were there were too many items that needed to be addressed at that time.
Right, I think the applicant withdrew.
Not
Not that one.
Not that one, no, the
Okay.
one
All
before
right, but
that.
the issue, Ms. McCord, is what we have is what was stamped, received March 27th, and it would appear what we have, and Joanne and people on the phone, tell me if you've got something else. In regards to the waivers, I've got a cover sheet for the relief from the outer 50 feet with the pages in regards to the procedure, and a December 24th letter in regards to the current site conditions, which was attached to this. This is actually dated December 24th. And then I have an application for waiver of checklist in regards to the 10-foot gravel road access, but that is dated 3/27. And the second page of that is is a write-up dated 3/27 of the closed drainage system waiver. So I'm actually not even seeing a formal waiver piece for the lighting. Am I missing that? Does anybody have a formal?
No, we just have the one.
Old file, I'm looking through it right now.
Madam Chair, on the March 27th waiver,
Yeah?
the reason it says closed drainage system, because that was a mistake. It should have said, that's for the access drive.
Oh, it does. That, right after that, it says 10-foot wide gravel.
Yes,
I thought
it
it was
does.
all part of the same.
I apologize for that.
Well, we're only gonna listen to the waivers tonight and we're not gonna actually discuss them if we don't have all the information in front of us. We're gonna have to get it on the waiver checklist form.
And I'm even further confused because if you have the relief from December 24th, I don't understand why you don't have the waivers from December 24th.
This is what I have. I don't
Right.
have what's in your hand.
You don't, it should have been attached to it.
I have a one-page letter.
Yep, that's this right here.
Okay, all
Yep.
right, so that's, but we have it for that, which is the 50-foot.
And you should have also had, that was submitted along with that, the two reports from Aaron Weschler.
Barbara,
Yes,
there is a thing from Aspen, if that's what she's talking about, when she talked about Aaron Wexler, dated,
January 6th.
6th, 2020. It said Aspen's at the top.
Yep, Aspen, that's Aaron Weschler. And there should have been one.
That doesn't seem to go to the waivers, though.
No, that was for the relief.
Yeah.
And there should have been another one from Aaron too, dated. January 6th.
I'm not seeing it.
That's what this one is right here from Aspen. It's dated January 6th.
Right, that's what
Okay.
we were talking about.
Came in the packet.
Okay, we're getting there.
Okay, well, I'm not really interested in spending 20 minutes trying to figure out if we've got everything that we need. Joanne, I'm a little confused as to what's going on with what we've got, and frankly, given what we had in our packet, the fact the applicant might be thinking that they would be getting approval tonight never occurred to me.
No, I was never under the impression that they would be getting approval tonight, but all of the 4 waivers were supposed to be included in your packet.
Are anybody on the phone that's participating telephonically, have you found something on each of the 4 waivers in your packet?
This is Karen, and I have not.
Okay. All right, I'm not hearing anybody else saying anything different. Yeah, but as to that's on page 9 of, right, the town administrator has got a write-up on it on page 9 of our report, but we were looking, specifically for the waiver request.
Don't say the town administrator.
I'm sorry, Planning and Economic Development, our planning director.
Barbara?
Yep, Phil.
The only waiver that I actually see is, well, what you read before, the relief from the out of 50, and then one application for waiver checklist requirement. It's a 10-foot wide gravel road to access detention pond. That's all I have.
Right, okay, so,
I think we
why don't, it would appear we don't have everything. We asked for an overview of the waivers. Ms. McCord has given us one in regards to, the closed drainage system, in regards to the fact that it's flat property, and you might actually be causing more harm than good if you have to do the closed drainage system, both as to the wetlands and as to the safety issues in regards to what would be needed to put in the curbing, or what you would need to do for the closed drainage. Sarah, do you have a position on the request to waive the closed drainage system? If
It
you
was
haven't,
one of my original comments, one of the first times we met with the applicant over their plan. And then, she mentioned a bunch of the LID limit, like low impact development that was in our regulations. And after meeting with the fire department, their stance on the curb, I kind of, I guess, passed down if they can make it work with the ditches and culverts. I understood particularly from the fire department standpoint with people parking on the side of the road and being able to still get around them.
okay. All right, does anybody else have any comments on the closed drainage system request? I'm not seeing or hearing any, so,
Lighting.
lighting, why don't you just briefly address lighting?
Okay, basically, because the houses are so close together, and we really didn't want to put in street lighting down through there. Each unit will have a light for the garage and a light at the doorway. In talking with Joanne about it, she suggested that the lighting over the garages be, motion censored. So I put that in the note on the sheet 3, so that, if somebody driving up, the light will come on so that you can get out of your car and get into your house. But we really didn't want to light up the world in putting street lights down through there.
All right, any board members have any questions on that? All right, infiltration pond access.
I'm going to briefly go over this, and then I know the attorney has the waiver on that was submitted is that you do have was written half by me and half by Attorney Mueller. Basically, it's this detention pond here, infiltration pond here, and then this infiltration pond here. This is a condominium, so it's gonna have a maintenance firm that takes care of everything, and they're gonna go behind all of these condos to mow and make sure everything's working properly, so that they'll be taking care of it. And and Sarah can talk to this, but part of the reasons I was given for wanting that access was so that if the town had to go take care of it. This is a private development. I wouldn't want the town out, the liability standpoint is huge, and like I said, the attorney can speak to it more, but it's, you're gonna have a condominium association, you're gonna have maintenance personnel taking care of this. If something goes wrong with those ponds, I think the town has much better tools to use to get them to go take care of it, but it's gonna affect them long before it affects the town, as far as if something happens to those two ponds. And the maintenance personnel are gonna get back there, cause they're gonna be mowing the lawns and everything else, and taking care of it.
Tim, did I see a hand?
We're not discussing them, right, tonight? We're just listening
Yeah,
to?
we're just hearing.
Okay,
We'll
I'll
just-
hold my questions for later then.
Okay,
I guess part of my concern is that, if we're not gonna discuss it tonight.
she
So-
wants some she needs some
I
feedback, and she's gonna come back. I'm
I'm
I asked Sarah for
terribly,
her comment on the drain.
terribly sorry you don't have the material, I just
It's
don't know
not
what else
your-
to do.
Right. So I understand Tim's point, they're coming back, but the applicant needs to have feedback and know where they stand. Sarah has commented as to the closed drainage system, that after further discussion, she's sort of agreeing with the waiver, and I know it's sort of reluctantly, but she recognizes the benefits that the applicant has pointed out. We've just asked about the access to the maintenance ponds. Let's have comment and discussion on that, Tim.
So in the event that you did have to provide, if there was a catastrophic failure, for instance, and the pond needed to be restored by machinery, how do you access those ponds the way you've got the buildings all tied together. Is there room to go between them to get to
Yes.
those ponds?
This one, yes, you go right off the road and go right down in there and do what you need to do.
How about the other one?
And the same one, this has a drainage pipe here, plus it has sewer pipes here, so this is fairly flat through here, so we can get through here, and it also can go up in through there.
So they are accessible.
Absolutely.
That's my only concern.
All right, any other board members have a question in regards to the issues regarding the infiltration pond access?
Barbara, this is Jim. Are you asking for comments now or just questions?
Both, I'm sorry, I phrased it.
Okay, my comment would be, I can't see where they're pointing, but on our representation of towns, we have seen many condominium associations that have not kept up infrastructure that one would think it was in their self-interest to do, including, for example, sewage systems, where of course it would, but they don't. So I'm not altogether convinced that just because there's a condo association that we don't have to worry about it.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Jennifer has got her hand up. Jennifer?
Dan may want to address this, but like I had said, is that yes, there are some condo associations that don't keep up their infrastructure. This is one of those infrastructures that's more in your face and not buried under the ground that you don't see, like a sewer system. Number two, I guess I'd ask Dan to talk to this a little bit more, is regarding other tools the town has to get the condominium association to take care of itself, instead of having the town actually go on the property and do work.
Dan?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. In terms of, if I can speak to Mr. Raymond's comment just briefly, I would note over the last couple of years, the condo statute in the state has changed to some extent to put some heavier duties on boards and associations than there were beforehand. And obviously one of the general duties of a condominium board and a condominium association is to maintain the common elements of the condominium, which in this case would necessarily include the detention areas. In terms of, if you're going to have it so that the town can get in there, the town would need an easement. Obviously, you'd have to have the deed and everything else. Usually with those sorts of easements, if the town does go in, there's usually a duty of restoration if you disturb anything. Number two, from the town's perspective, if the town goes in and does maintenance and then something happens, obviously, if it's traceable to the town, there may be liability issues on the part of the town. Now, that being the case, obviously the town wants to do something if something catastrophic does happen, as was mentioned. And you do have various remedies out there. Obviously, you can seek an injunction if this was a condition of approval that they maintain this to a certain schedule. You could seek an injunction against the condominium association to essentially enforce it. As you probably know, there are additional things involving attorney's fees and civil penalties that usually, in most cases, persuade people to try to remedy it before it gets to that stage, because it gets expensive. So I do think there are some things out there that do make it a little bit more in terms of the self-interest if the association is going to maintain those. And I would agree with Ms. McCourt that, again, these are going to be visible things. It's not like the pipes underneath or things of that nature where you don't see them. I mean, mowing is something that basically every condo association, when they hire out a property management company, looks to have done on a regular basis. Because it affects, if you look sloppy, obviously that's going to affect the values of the units, and that usually leads owners to complain bitterly. So I do think there is a little bit more in terms of self-interest. There's also, again, a little bit more under the current condo statute than there used to be in terms of the duties of board members to essentially watch out for the association. And that's what I have to offer at this point.
Board members, further questions or comments? Tim?
To revert back to the lighting request, if you are going to just have lighting on the buildings that all meet the night sky requirement, I don't have any problems with discussing the waiver for the lighting.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what the note says on sheet 3, is that it would have to conform to that.
Further questions or comments? I would comment simply that in a quick review of the declarations of the condo documents, infiltration ponds are not mentioned anywhere in maintenance and repair or common area. So I would suggest that that might need to be looked at. Again, I do see drainage swales in one area, but not in common area.
Can I speak to the 2 ponds that I called out just to show you what access I'm concerned about?
Thank you, Sarah. Go ahead.
So on sheet 5, between building 7 and building 8,
Okay.
in order to access that pond, in my opinion, like if it came to it and it was failing, the town would have to either park in someone's driveway for 7 or 8, or pull over on the side of 114.
Okay.
And then the next one is on sheet 6.
Okay.
The pond behind buildings 9 and 10.
Yeah.
A town truck would be required to either park in 9 or 10's driveway, then somehow get equipment between the 2 buildings, or park on the side of the road and still snake between 2 buildings, or park along South Mast.
Okay.
And
Jennifer?
I understand that, and I guess, I would, going back to what Dan said and the liabilities of the town going in and taking care of those ponds is probably something that I would look long and hard at. And I would push it back onto the condominium people to go take care of it. On top of it, if you look at those infiltration ponds, the outlets to it, the outlets to all the ponds are either pipes, 12 or 15-inch pipes with no restriction, or a cut berm, basically a V-notch in the berm. So we're not looking at, 2-inch holes or anything like that restricting the flow that's going to be clogged, so it's going to be a constant maintenance problem. This is something that is, very easily kept open with, mowing and a rake.
Tim?
Well, the only concern, Jennifer, that I have is that in the event of the failure of either the 2 ponds that the town engineer just mentioned, the detrimental effect is directly into the brook. And that's where my concerns would be, that they would be maintained properly and that we wouldn't be discussing this. So, it's not like they're just going to overtop and spill into a field. They're going to go directly into the brook. So I think this is probably a lot of the concern that you're hearing tonight is the impact that it could have should there be a failure.
Correct, and it's into the 100-foot buffer before it gets to the brook. So there is some, especially this one here, you have a field here.
Okay.
Before it gets to the woods, so you're gonna see it. This one actually we're outletting down, this is all a sloped area here, so it's gonna be obvious also.
Okay.
It's, I try to make things as simple as possible so that they can be fixed as simply as possible. and noticed. And these are like, you know, it's not something underground that you can't see. This is in your face, in your backyard. Each one of these are in somebody's backyard.
Well, that is, of course, part of the concern. When they're in somebody's backyard, even though they're technically common area, they become people's backyards, and I understand that I understand the point of the attorney and yourself in regards to the maintenance, but
Yeah.
that is part of the concern over time, and we know how things happen over time, but thank you for addressing them. Anything else from board members on the infiltration ponds? All right, I do note that the other waiver is the school impact fees, and I think that's sort of a bigger general discussion that I sort of want to leave to last. You talked about the change in the layout of the plan and the buildings. You want to point out, just so everybody has it, the turnaround that you've developed, you put in, and the fire department has approved in regards to the road that's sort of one end now.
Right, basically, we've done a hammerhead here for the fire trucks to come in and be able to turn around. They'll be able to turn around before they get into the 20 feet for Building 8. Or also, just to expand on that a little bit more, I didn't get into the, there's a sewer manhole here that connects into the interceptor. There's already an existing cut in those trees right there, so we're taking advantage of that, not only for the sewer, but also for access to the trail for these units. These units would access the trail through the existing
Angel Point.
driveway that goes through there. As I stated before, we're in very deep conversations with Public Service about getting a joint use agreement and easements. And hopefully you have a copy of that email from Eversource dated March 25th. Russ Malley.
Yep.
And it basically says that, yeah, we are working with him and the plans look,
And it's to have a plan to agree.
right. We agree, we just need to go through all the paperwork and through the correct boards to get approval, but
Okay, so this has to do with access and also getting to the rail trail. Are there any other discussions or comments on that? Okay. Are there any, there is also an issue in regards to the wetland conservation, the surface water conservation district relief. I understand Conservation has granted that request. Is that request?
They've recommended you to approve that
Right.
request, and that was basically on a bigger impact that I had. That was when I had the
Because that was
road-
back in January,
That
yeah.
was back in January when I had the road coming out here, and I actually had a culvert underneath here that stuck into the impact area. I've gone from 710 feet of permanent impact down to, I think it's 210 feet of temporary impact for, and it's just to grade this area out so that the water will drain from that one area.
Board members have any comments or concerns in regards to that request? I'm not hearing any. I certainly think it's a big improvement and much better.
Sorry, Barbara, can I ask a question?
Sure, Kimberly.
On the plans that we have in our packet, it looks like there's still, there's like 11 square feet behind building 7, is that right, or did that building get shifted over even further?
It's an 11-foot impact into the buffer. That's still there. That's the 210 square feet of temporary impact. And to mitigate that, far more than mitigate it, the water that's coming off of Mass Road and South Mass Street will go through the infiltration basins and be treated, which is not being treated now before it goes into Dan Little Brook or to Glen Lake.
Why is it temporary?
Because we're just gonna grade it out and then grass it back
Oh, it's just the
in.
grading, it's not the porch. Okay.
No, there's no structures
Right.
within the outer 50 feet whatsoever.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? All right. The last waiver request is in regards to the school impact fees. And Joanne, you wanna bring us up to date on what they're proposing for the age restriction?
So the last that I knew when I spoke with Attorney Mullen the other day, they were changing the approval. Right now, the approval is for 55 and older. Only one person needs to be 55. That's the normal 55 and older. And in this case, 20% could be anyone could live there, and the other 80% would be restricted to one person being 55. But the change here is that they wanted to change the restriction to one person being 55 and no one younger than 21. So that was the document. It's part of the declaration that was sent over to Attorney Drescher for review.
Okay, so 155, no one under 18, I mean.
21.
One. And Attorney Mullen is on the phone, and I'm sure he would like to address this.
I have a comment too, Barbara, when you get a chance.
Okay. Attorney Mullen?
Yeah. In terms of the age restriction, the federal law, and actually both the federal and state law require, if you're going to have 55 plus, you have to have 80% of your occupants have to be 55 or older. The other 20% technically are not age restricted. We did put language into the declaration saying that generally speaking, if you're 21 or younger, you cannot reside there. We did put language based on some experiences we've had with other similar developments when questions have come up about, for example, grandchildren visiting for the summer. Language that suggests that they can visit on a temporary basis. They would only be visitors or guests. They would not be residents and could not be residents. So the overall intent here is to make it so that there would be no school-age children in this development. Again, you could have people visit as guests on a temporary basis, but that is it. They could not be residents such that they could attend the schools there.
Okay. Karen, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so there's actually been a court case out of Rhode Island in the First Circuit where arguably special education is through age 22, not age 21. So that's a concern that I have. And under McKinney-Vento, which is the Homeless Student Act, it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not they're residents of the facility. It's far more complicated than that. And in addition to that, we also provide in our schools adult education. So insofar as that has any impact on school impact fees for adult education, you know, I wonder whether or not we should be waiving it for those reasons, and also for the additional reasons that I mentioned about special education, which is a fairly complicated area of the law.
Okay. Any other comments on this request? Tim?
So, it's just recently come to my attention that there is a 20-year restriction on this. I never heard this before when we've granted these waivers in the past for the school impact fee. So, does anybody have any information where this 20-year lifespan comes from? Is it a legislature? Is it legislated? Is it RSA? Is it, where's it come from?
Attorney Mullen?
In terms of, if you're talking about your regulations, Those are your regulations. I don't know where the 20-year comes from as a general matter. You can, if you're trying to comport with the federal law, or to essentially get yourself outside of an age or family discrimination complaint, you have to have these in place so long as you're going to have the age restriction in place. It's not limited to 20 years. My belief is, and I'd have to take a look at your regulations, but I think that comes from something in your regulations as opposed to the state or federal law. Again, I'm not aware that there's anything that says you only have to do it for 20 years to be exempt from the federal law. As far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, if you're going to be 55 plus and get that protection, you have to have those covenants in place, because you have to do the surveys, you have to do the verification of age of the occupants on a regular basis, so that you do not run afoul of the federal requirements.
Thank you.
Barbara, can I ask a follow-up question?
Certainly, Karen.
So is there in essence, I guess this is a question for Attorney Mullen, but is there after 20 years, can people that are under the age of 21 reside
Yep.
in these condominiums?
Yes, they can.
Yes.
Okay, and
I mean, I can make it, the question is whether I can make this so long this is 55 plus. And here's the thing about this. We've also had language that you cannot get rid of the age restriction that's set forth in the condo document without the consent of the town. So this isn't a situation where, 10, 15 years down the road, someone can just suddenly change it without any say on the part of the town. Those things, that sort of language is usually routinely put in there to protect against that sort of thing. But if you want something that basically says that this goes in perpetuity, to make it in perpetuity, absent getting consent from the town, and in this case, you'd also have to get the consent of the condo owners to amend the condo document to eliminate the age restriction. I mean, that's the intent right now, that absent an approval by the eventual unit owners and the town, the age restriction stays in place.
This is Barbara. I'd like to follow up with two questions. One is as to the 80-20 that you're proposing. Is the 80-20 a requirement, or my understanding is that was a minimum, that 80% needed to be it, so that the applicant is in fact choosing to not make the entire development age restricted? And then my second question goes to the ability to even adopt the 21 and under restriction, given that the law only addresses the other spectrum of age, 55 and older, or in some cases 62. So if Attorney Mullen could address those two questions, the 80-20 split, and where in law it is allowed to even restrict 21 or 18-year-olds in a development.
Okay. Basically, the 80-20 is the minimum to satisfy the federal and state requirements for 55 plus. Obviously, there is another category, 62 plus, where everybody has to be at least 62 years or older. Again, I could speak to my client about it. If you want this to be all 55 plus, I'd have to speak to Mr. Viviers and get back to you. Can you do it? Yes.
Okay.
And for the same reason, you can do the 21, because again, what you're putting in place here, normally you cannot discriminate on the basis of age in terms of housing. This is an exception to what would otherwise be age discrimination housing. And because you're following the federal law, yes, you could limit the persons, and again, if you want to do it 21, 22 or younger. You know, the one exception I would say that does exist and is in the document is the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's an exception. Can't do anything about it. People can request a reasonable accommodation in terms of a caretaker who would be under the age, technically 21, 22. That is just out there. But you can do it. Again, if the board is saying we would prefer it be all 55 or older, I would need to speak to Mr. Viviers and get back to you on that.
Okay. Other questions?
Margaret, if I could,
Karen?
if I could comment. Yeah, so, I mean, you know, I don't care if it's a 55 plus, you know, only community or anything. This just is in terms of the waiver. And I think that there is a question in the education laws as to whether or not it's actually through age 22 or through age 21. And that has not been hashed out by the Supreme Court, and there's a question about whether or not in the First Circuit if it would apply to New Hampshire. So if you're going to have an age restriction which doesn't impact school fees, it really should be through age 22, not age 21.
Okay. Jennifer, Ms. McCourt.
I just have one question. It's my understanding that you had another age-restricted condominium approved, and the school impact fee was waived on that. Was there any repercussions on that? Have they had people from that development actually go to school or impact the schools? I guess, you know, that's just a question, because you did waive that on another condominium.
You're correct, we did. I don't recall that development was an 80-20 split. And that development has been in there for a few years, and I'm not aware of, I'm not personally aware of what impact there is. I do have some concerns, though, going forward as to whether or not we can address the issue of a 18 or 21 or 22 year limit at all, because I'm concerned about that.
We did set that at that other one. We did set a
I
minimum,
understand that, but,
a minimum age.
right.
Yes, and I've seen it widespread across New Hampshire.
Right.
In many age restricted, that they have a minimum age restriction.
Okay. Tim?
So on this whole discussion of the 80-20, I was, without probably reading things carefully enough, I was under the impression this was a over 55 community, but apparently it is not. Okay, thank you for that clearance.
Other board members or comments? I will say that I would not be inclined to grant the waiver for the school impact fees in an 80-20 split community. And I do have some concerns about the lower age restriction in regards to our ability to even do it, regardless of what we've done in the past.
Hello, this is Norris Viviers.
Yes,
Just wanted to make a comment, please.
sure.
I have no intention of doing 80-20. I'd prefer it to be 100% 55 and older. And whatever the board prefers for the language on the minimum age is fine with me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Barbara, this is Kimberly.
Yeah, Kimberly?
Hi, I'm not in support of the waiver either. I just have concerns that we end up having to enforce something, and it just because we did it on another parcel doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it the same every time. And I think I brought this concern up before. It just becomes an issue of enforcement, and I don't agree with this.
Other comments from board members on the waiver? The applicant has indicated it would not be an 80-20 split. It would be 100% 55 and older, one person 55 and older.
So Barbara, this is Karen again. I don't know. I mean, I think that there's too many what ifs in the law personally to, you know, say whether or not a student would be able to live there. There's too many what ifs if, given what Attorney Mullen talked about the Caretaker Act and that being utilized. I mean, to be able to say that I would be fully in support of a waiver.
Okay. Other comments from
Can
board
I
members?
just,
Yes, Mr. Villiers, go ahead.
now this is Dan Muller, can I
Oh.
just respond just briefly?
Yeah?
And just to clarify, I think what Mr. Vivier said is that all occupants, because the federal law focuses on occupants of the dwelling. That's the relevant thing. So if you change it to 100%, 100% of the people who occupy that, as a general matter, would be 55 or older. You would get rid of the other language in there because it wouldn't be necessary. You would have something that says all occupants have to be 55 plus. Again, I do recognize the ADA is out there. You know, in terms of impact there, likely if you have a caretaker who is younger than that, they're probably doing that as a full-time job as opposed to something, you know, going to school. But that is it's a rarer exception to the rule. The general rule here would be everyone would be 55 plus who occupies any of those units.
I have a question, Barbara.
This is Norris. If I could just weigh in on this, please.
Yes, sir.
Dan, no, there was a misunderstanding. When I'm saying 100%, I'm saying 100% with one person or more being
Okay.
Being 55. But even that said, we're dealing with a remote possibility. If you put a minimum age of 22 years old, we're dealing with such a extremely remote possibility that it's some obscure law or something that one person finds their way in there, the unlikeliness of that, and to require that 46 or 42 units pay school impact fees for the remote possibility that maybe possibly by some weird, strange act that would require that one person might go to school. It seems a little bizarre that I'd be burdened with 42 units of impact fees on an extremely remote chance. And aside from that, the condominium units are taxed in a large part by the schools. These are more of a contributor than they would ever be any kind of a burden. So to even remotely begin to think of charging impact fees for 42 units on some remote what if is pretty obscure.
Okay, thank you.
Barbara,
Karen?
So it's not the remote what if. It's if somebody is living in one of the units, at least for me, right? Somebody is living in one of the units and somehow is, you know, and when I say living, I don't mean necessarily occupant or a resident, but somebody that's a visitor that then qualifies for educational services. There's a continuum of placements. We're not just talking about them going to regular public school. We're talking about them potentially going to an out-of-district placement like a special education day school or a special education residential school, which costs upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's what I'm thinking about in terms of worst-case scenarios. It's not just this remote possibility of somebody being in the unit that then can go to the regular public school where their per pupil cost is like $15,000 to $18,000 per year.
Thank you, Karen.
Mr. Chairman?
I have a question. Barbara, before you get a chance.
I'm sorry, who is this on the phone?
This is Joanne.
Peter wants to talk.
Oh, go ahead.
question. So if we decide that we need to charge school impact fees, or we can't waive school impact fees, is this gonna be, are we setting the precedent for the rest of any of these 55 and older communities that come in, that school impact fees will necessarily have to be charged on the same basis that we're all using for not allowing the discontinuation of those fees? I'm just asking that, playing maybe devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, so we're setting the precedent, or we're setting that we're now not going to allow the discontinuation of impact fees on 55 and older housing.
Certainly could be argued.
Karen?
You want my opinion on it?
You're speaking up about, and I understand that a coded person could come in and could cost $100,000 and move in with grandma and grandpa because nobody else is there to take care of them in the
Right,
in the town.
$100,000 a year.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that. Being on the budget committee for so many years, what a person like that can cost us. But I mean, are we setting the Are we setting the rule for anybody else that comes into town on one of these kind of developments that they have to pay the fees?
I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, and I think it depends on, the law at that particular point in time. And at this point in time, there's a lot of what ifs. Like, it hasn't been, in my experience, it hasn't been thoroughly, vetted by the Supreme Court. So, the Supreme Court of the United States is what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a case-by-case basis, but at this point in time, given the state of the law, I would say the potential impact on the schools is significant.
Okay. Jennifer, she asked to speak earlier. Go ahead, please.
I guess my question is that my understanding is that the impact fees can only be used for capital improvements, and that they can't be used for the hundreds of thousands that one might incur for if it was out of town placement. So,
Therein lies the problem, because that impact fee goes to another fund, and if you have some child that gets in there and we have to pay for it out of our tax base. It doesn't come out of the impact fee, so.
that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
Barbara?
Joanne?
My understanding of the housing for older persons is, for under the New Hampshire law, is that you have three choices. One is solely occupied by persons 62 years of age and older, which both parties would need to be 62 or older. The second one would be at least one person 55. And then in determining that, you'd have to allow for 80% of the units to have that restriction, but that you cannot, if someone were, say, for instance, 55, and they had a grandson who was 5, that would qualify them to be living there. The only way you can restrict no school-age children would be to go with the 62 and older. That's my understanding of the law. And there's, others that may disagree with that, but that was my understanding.
I believe that would be right, and again, the 55 has a minimum of 80, but could be the entire thing.
Correct.
Okay. Jim, do you have anything you want to chime in on this?
This is Norris. I have a question regarding the minimum age thing. My experience with these communities is sometimes you'll have one of the occupants maybe 55, 50 or whatever, and have a spouse that's 49, 50, whatever, that sort of thing. What I'm trying to avoid is there a way that we can get those people in there without risking having somebody in there that's going to be under the age or of the school age that that could potentially create that liability, because I have no intention, and the other, I have no intention of, I don't like the 80-20 thing. People who buy in age-restricted communities want to be in an age-restricted, they don't want to be around kids. So the other thing is there's an enforcement factor on the part of the condominium association. They don't want kids in there. So Dan, is there a mechanism for somebody violating that covenant that they can be removed or any consequences of violating that covenant?
There can be consequences of violating the covenant. There have been some of these where people have gotten themselves into trouble with either the federal housing people or the state people because they haven't been particularly diligent, and therefore a majority of these communities, they do. It would be a violation of, number one, the condominium declaration. You could bring an action under 356B15 against the person to enjoin it. You could also get attorney's fees under the statute for that. There would be additional enforcement under this to the town if they thought the association wasn't doing it. Basically the same sort of right to enforce that would be you have to abide by the covenant. I mean, it's the same thing with any condo requirement in the instruments, that if you don't, then they can bring an action against you to force you to stop. And again, there is a self-interest here, because if you do not enforce it and you get too far afield, you may invite an age discrimination complaint and involvement from either the federal or state authorities, in which case it would be against the condo association. So again, there are enforcement mechanisms. You can enforce that covenant against people who violate it. That's the whole reason for putting it in the condo declaration to begin with.
Okay.
So I guess the question becomes, is there a way to protect the town from the potential liability? And how do we accomplish that to make this planning board comfortable that we're not gonna hit that's not gonna become an issue for us or the town?
Jim Raymond, please.
I'm going to suggest that the applicant has asked us a question, and we're not going to answer it off the seat of our pants or the top of our heads. I understand the issue. I'm going to need time to think about that. I'm looking as we speak at the fair housing statutes, and they're not entirely clear, but I'm beginning to see a solution, but I'm not going to propose it now. I think we've heard the arguments. I think we need to take this to the next meeting. We understand the applicant's intent, and we may agree with it. The question is, can we get there lawfully? But my own opinion is you can allow certain elder age restrictions, but there's a general rule otherwise. You cannot discriminate on the basis of age, which includes young ages. So we need to be assured that whatever restrictions are put on are enforceable and can be used to enforce the restriction against what we'll call younger people. As a person as well over 55, I agree with the applicant's interpretation of housing goals. I'm not convinced yet we can get there with what's proposed, but I don't want to vote on it today.
All right, so thank you, Jim, for putting that forward. I commented that based on the staff that we had, the recommendation had been to continue the application to a date certain. I am not hearing, let me just ask members of the board, as to the Wetland Surface Water Conservation District, Conservation Commission has recommended that we approve it. The applicant has reduced the impacts since the conservation voted on it. Can I hear from any member of the board right now, and this is not binding, it has an issue with requests for that relief? I think in general, my read is that request for relief is all right. In regards to the motion detectors on the buildings as compared to street lighting, and it would need to comply with our night sky ordinance, are there any members of the board that have issues with that waiver request? The drainage, the access to the infiltration ponds, we heard from Sarah a little bit about confirming what the applicant said the issues were in providing access. And I pointed out to the applicant that maybe some words need to be changed in the condo documents. Do I have any members that have concerns in regards to the waiver request for access to the infiltration ponds?
Barbara, this is Jim. I still have concerns with that.
Okay.
Actually, for the reasons I stated earlier, I'm not convinced that the remedies that have been suggested are sufficient to protect the public interest in the operation of these
All right.
drainage systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And we've just had a discussion in regards to the impact fees, which has been brilliantly pointed out. We are not about to resolve, especially given the circumstances of our discussion and what we have before us. So,
For the record, Barbara, you're being too kind in your adjectives, but
all right. Jennifer?
There's the fourth waiver regarding the closed drainage system.
You mentioned that, Barbara.
I think I sort of lumped the closed drainage and the infiltration to get access together.
Okay, because they're
But
two
just
separate.
specifically, does anybody have any issue in regards to the closed drainage system waiver request? I'm not hearing any, Jennifer. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
Oh, thank you.
Does anybody,
I'm not sure yet. That's something I think we need to talk to Sarah about, and I didn't get it clear.
right,
answer
and at
from
this
her,
point,
but
I'm not
Maybe you did.
sure where we are on this. Sarah, did you have a specific comment on the closed drainage waiver request? We talked about the infiltration ponds, but I did not ask you about the closed drainage.
Actually, you kind of did at the beginning. I commented on it when we first saw these plans, and then after meetings with, it was really like the fire department's comments about how curbing can be a hazard to like limiting their access.
Right, okay, you did
The
say that,
road.
thank you. And as to the infiltration pond, you still have problems with the access and want to point out where the parking is going to have to occur if maintenance needs to happen. Thank you. At this time, as this was a noticed hearing, I'm going to open the public hearing for map 5, lot 60. There are no members of the public here present in the room with us tonight. If there's anybody who has a comment on this application, I'd ask them to call in, and if they're on the line, to hit *9. Do we have any members of the public that might want to make a comment by calling in?
I don't see anyone pressing *9, but everyone's unmuted, so they could also speak up as well, but I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Is there any member of the public who's not part of the applicant's team or a planning board member who'd like to speak on this application? Hearing nothing, I'm going to close the public hearing, subject to reopening at a further date. Joanne?
Before you do that, since Mr. Pernaugh is on the line, do you want him to just briefly go through his traffic memo?
Was it reviewed by Public Works?
Was the traffic report reviewed by Public Works?
It was reviewed by Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
And my recollection is they did not have issues with it, did they?
They had some comments, and the one comment that I think needs to be considered is number 4, which is the highlighted comment. This project actually falls under New Hampshire DOT because it's that section of the roadway is controlled by them. I did speak with them today, and they are still reviewing plans. But Southern New Hampshire did do an analysis of the report from Mr. Pernoff.
All right, so the public hearing is still open for comment, but Mr. Pernoff, why don't we hear from you with an overview of the traffic and Southern New Hampshire Planning's comment, which I assume you received?
Yes, I did. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you very much.
Great. Well, a memorandum dated March 2nd of this year included research of available traffic count data. The state does have a short-term station not too far away, and you're looking at an annual average daily traffic volume of about 16,000 cars a day in 2019. Quite typical, and you'll find this on page 2 of our report, that there's a peak in the morning. This is commuters going to work. It's generally 7 to 8 or 8 to 9. And then in the afternoon, there's the return trip. We see another peak from generally 3 to 4, 4 to 5, or 5 to 6. This is all pretty standard. Our trip generation analysis was based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip rates and equations. On page 3, you'll find a table that shows that the overall development in terms of a worst-case situation is only 30 vehicle trips during the PM peak hour. So that's 30 split amongst 3 access points, if you will. And our conclusion, when you have that type of trip count, and when you think about it in terms of a peak hour, you're talking about 1 additional vehicle every 2 minutes on average. And I got to tell you, as a traffic operations engineer, that's really de minimis. This project is not going to impact other intersections on the corridor. As a matter of fact, daily variations, just from one day to the next on 114, accounts for much greater changes than what this development will create. We did make a recommendation about stop sign control and pavement markings. Again, those are in the form of a suggestion. And I think, as Joanne mentioned, this is being reviewed by the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, as this road is under their jurisdiction. So that's my Reader's Digest version of our March 2nd memorandum.
Thank you. And in regards, Joanne, to your issues in regards to Southern New Hampshire, Ms. McCourt sent a letter dated March 27th. That was in our package on page 4, where she responded to the Southern New Hampshire planning comments. And Joanne, you suggested perhaps addressing comment number 4 regarding sidewalks in particular.
No, not number 4 in their letter, number 4 in the staff report.
Oh, okay.
Barbara, I have a question, this Jim, for Mr. Pernar, if I may.
Yep.
I'm looking really, it's on the last page of his report. He just sat through that exciting discussion on age restrictions, and I'm wondering what assumptions he was making in this report about the ages of the occupants and whether that affected his report.
The answer to that is that was accounted for in the report. If you look at page 3, table 1, you'll see that we used a land use code that reflects age-restricted housing.
And for your purposes, what does that mean? What were the assumptions about the occupants' ages?
Well, ITE lumps them all together. If you hang on 1 second, I'll grab a book off my desk. This is the most appropriate land use code to use in this case. But the description of the category, according to ITE, says senior adult housing consists of detached independent living units, including retirement communities, age-restricted housing, and active adult communities. And it goes on to describe some of the amenities. So the fact that it is age restricted is why we selected Land Use Code 251.
May I ask one follow-up question?
Thank you, go ahead.
And I'll be quick. It just, given the applicant's offer to have a greater restriction than was originally proposed, would that change your analysis, or is that just a general age-restricted category that you're relying on that does not break down the ages further than that general?
Correct. When ITE collects, comes up with these trip rates, it's based on, a survey of many, many similar age-restricted developments. So there is no distinction about the discussion of that 80-20 split I heard earlier. Obviously, if the applicant is going to propose 100% 55 plus, then, we're certainly covered with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing, Jim, just to point out, when you're dealing with a peak hour estimate of 30 trips, that's pretty low. Again, random things happen. One day it could be 28, the next day it could be 32. This is an average weekday estimate. And quite frankly, if it was 30, 40, or 50, split amongst 3 driveways, my conclusions would not change.
All right, in follow-up to the comment from our planning director into number 4, which deals with, and I think there was a slight reference to it, but not specific, there was a recommendation in regards to stop sign controls and a white stop line.
That is now shown on sheet 4 of 20, so they did address that comment.
Okay, and what about the 4-inch yellow center line?
That, they called that out as an option. They've shown the white line with the stop sign.
Okay, and is that sufficient, do you think? Jennifer McCourt, thank you.
I actually got a letter back from DOT asking for some minor changes on the plan, and that was one of them, to add in the 4-inch double yellow line, a short section, so that those will be added to the plan.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any other questions or comments? Excuse me, we talked about the traffic. Is there any member, I didn't officially close the public hearing, is there anybody pressing *9, not part of the applicant's team or the planning board, who might like to make a comment further on this plan tonight? I'm seeing none, so I will close the public hearing to whatever date to be resumed that this plan is further heard. Joanne, I do note that on your report tonight, even with the changes, it was recommended to continue this. Do you have a date that you're suggesting?
Yes, I'm not suggesting a specific date. It really is dependent on how fast Jennifer and staff could work through the remainder of these comments. I would expect that would take longer than 2 weeks, because technically we have to get it into your packets a week prior to your meeting, then only leaves a week. So I would probably suggest that it be continued to the first meeting, the second.
May.
Okay, so the first meeting in May. All right. Tim?
I'd like to, since we're talking about traffic, I'd like to ask the applicant some questions about what we discussed tonight. We talked about how you were requesting that get away from the vertical granite curbing.
Yes.
Because if people park in the road, it's gonna restrict the fire truck movement. Was that your statement?
That was one of the reasons that came from the fire department. My main reason was because of the elevation challenge and the drainage structures that I would put in that would impact the endangered species that are around the site.
Well, my concern is that if people are likely gonna park in the road, and there's only a single parking space in front of each of these units, where is all the extra parking for visitors and other people when they come to visit the people who live in these units? And how is that not gonna have an adverse effect on traffic or emergency traffic that wants to get in and out of this project?
Each unit also has a garage,
Okay?
so there's actually 2 parking spaces for each unit, which is more than what's required by your regulations.
Well, it would seem to me that most units would have 2 cars. Would you not concur? That most people are gonna have 2 cars? 2 people are gonna live there, everybody has their own car. I mean, that's an assumption, but I
It's an
think it's a
assumption.
reasonable assumption.
It's an assumption.
But now
It
when,
depends if there are 2 people living there also.
now when the family comes to visit or people come to visit, we don't have any visitor parking allocated on this project anywhere. So I'm a little concerned that the references to the fire trucks being restricted with people parking on the street could become a regular occurrence in this project.
Well, we did put the width of the roadway at 24 feet to make it wider, along with 3-foot shoulders,
Okay?
to give them room to be able to park off to the side and not take up the entire road, or a good portion of it. So we were, trying to make space for it. And, like I said, we are meeting the requirements of the regulation. We're more than meeting the requirements of the regulation for parking.
We don't have any regulations for visitor parking, I assume, then?
No, we
Thank
do
you.
not. Anything else from board members? Joanne, do you have a date for the meeting in May?
Yeah, May 14th.
Barbara, before you vote, don't you want to hear the results of my research on the?
Oh, I didn't think that you were
Date.
gonna finish.
I thought you've been on the edge of your seat the whole time. Yes, the Governor's Emergency Order 23 kind of waives planning board deadlines generally.
I thought, but I was confident that if we came back on May 14th, we'd be able to deal with it and still be within our 65-day clock. So thank you for clarifying that, since we just accepted it tonight. All right,
One last question for Jennifer. Were you able to get any information about the Villa Augustina's septic discharge, sewer discharge for your calculations, for your lines on your site?
Yes, I did, and I did share that with Mike, and the capacity of the 8-inch line is very large, and we're only gonna be using a very small portion of that. I don't have that in front of me tonight, but also theirs is a pump system.
Right.
So that they could set the dosage to not create a problem. But,
Well,
and because the gravity line that was in there before that the pump line went to was only an 8-inch line also,
And what are you replacing it with, an 8-inch line?
an 8-inch line.
Just as long as you're confident that should they discharge the full volume of their tank in a single discharge, that it wouldn't flood your system to the point where your residents would
Well, part of
have
the,
issues.
right, part of what's required under the DPW recommendations is that we get an easement with the Village Augustina for them, give them an easement to discharge their flow into our pipes, because right now they don't have that.
I saw the
And
flow
part,
easement in the packet.
and part of that is regulating what they can put in there.
Okay, just wanted, I asked you that question once before, I just wanted to follow up on it.
thank you. All right, so this application, it has been suggested to continue this to May 14th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Tim has moved this application to be before the board again on May 14th. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
It's been seconded. All right, all those in favor, Tim?
Aye.
I vote yes. Peter?
Yeah.
Karen?
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kimberly.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, people on the line, for participating. This application will be back before us on the 14th of May. Thank you, Jennifer, for coming in and dealing with the wind in our parking lot.
It's not our wind, it's God's wind.
It's our parking lot. It may be everybody's wind, but there you go. I heard it was supposed to get,
Well, thank you very much for
Winning.
making the effort to have these meetings during these trying times. I appreciate it.
all right, the next item on our agenda is, sort of other informational. This is a discussion with the school district on the Glen Lake Addition project. There will not be anybody here in the room with us from the school district. They should be online. Scott Gross should be joining remotely by phone, and Dan Tatum should be joining remotely by phone. Gentlemen, are you with us?
I'm here.
Who's up?
Scott Gross, I'm here as well.
Okay.
Yeah, this is.
Barbara, this is Jim. Before we begin, I'm going to note I am the school district moderator, but since this is something we only comment on, we don't approve as a governmental use, I'm not going to recuse myself unless you get a strong feeling otherwise.
All right, thank you for clarifying for the record for that, Jim. All right, gentlemen, who's gonna take us through this? And do I understand that if you're looking at this on GTV, you should be able to see the plan?
I could not, this is Dan Tatum. I'll be doing the presentation for the SAU tonight. Just want to confirm you can hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I represent the school. I work for Stantec Consulting. We've been the engineer for the Goffstown School District for a number of years now. And Scott Gross also introduced himself. He is here to field any questions that I may not be able to answer. What we're proposing to do is located at the Glen Lake School.
All right, before, thank you, Mr. Tatum. Before, do I understand that a PDF was provided and that you can see it displayed on GTV?
I cannot see it for whatever reason. I've tried it on several different phones and on my computer, and I cannot get logged on. But I have the plans in front of me. I've been listening for the entire meeting, so I kind of understand how we're doing this. I should be able to talk the board members who are both remote and in the room through the plan pretty quickly.
All right, I have been told that nothing was provided to GTV. We need to get that straightened out for the future. Joanne, do you know anything about that?
No, I was under the impression that because we were doing it this way, that we couldn't show anything. But now that I'm aware of that, I'll make sure they have everything they need.
Well, the list I got from planning staff as to who was gonna be here and who participating very clearly says PDF will be provided to GTV to display on overhead screen, and that came from planning. All right. So, all right, so, sorry, Mr. Tatum, back to you.
Okay. We provided both paper copies for tonight's meeting and PDF digital copies to the planning department a week and a half ago or so for the project. As I stated, it's at the Glen Lake School, tax map 5, lot 14-1. And what the school district is proposing to do is to add a modular addition that is approximately 65 feet wide by 98 feet long. And I'm going to say left and right. It might be easier for people holding the plans. To the left side of the building, which happens to also be the west side. As part of that addition, there will be a water and sewer connection. Currently, those two services run on the right side of the building as you drive up to it. We're going to be extending both of those services along the front of the existing school and then they will both turn 90 degrees and turn into the side of the new modular addition. The septic tank will be sized, and the septic line will be sized as if the 4 new classrooms that will be in the addition and 2 bathrooms, as if they were full of the maximum capacity. So we've sized the septic system for 100 people to be in that addition. However, the school's intent is not to add 100 extra kids. It's to spread the children and the staff out appropriately and have a reasonable amount of room in their classrooms and in their facilities. So we're not planning on an increase in students, we're just spreading them out. However, if the school ever does increase and they want to put more either teachers, staff, or children in that building, the septic tank has been sized for the maximum capacity of that building. Likewise, the water main that we have brought across the front of the school into the side of the addition is a 6-inch ductile iron main that has been reviewed by Village Water, and Lee, who's the superintendent over there, has reviewed the plans and will be part of inspecting the installation of that water main. Also, the fire inspector has reviewed, given us his comments, and we've taken care of all of his needs as well. As far as the fire flow, the building will be sprinklered. It will come from the pre-manufactured company without the sprinkler system in it. The sprinkler system will be put in by a local contractor, and then potentially a acoustical or pre-hung ceiling will come down off the existing ceiling to hide that piping. That's still up in the air. There's been a new extension to the fire lanes, both front of the building and to the rear of the building, and they're labeled no parking fire lane on both of them. And there will be an emergency access set of doors to the left side or the west side of the building with a paved sidewalk and a concrete step exiting by that door. There will be a stick-built or an on-site constructed connector building that's 10 by 16. So the existing school and this addition will have a dry enclosed connection between the two, so staff and children can walk from one building to the other. It will appear as if you're going through a hallway versus going outside, having to deal with rain or security issues as well. So there, it will be a secured access to that addition. The electrical utilities will come in off of the back. They're going to run a separate transformer off of the power lines that run up the back slope. They will run secondary power underground to the back right corner of the addition, and the interior electrical will be coordinated with the typical or the usual electrician that the school uses. Working towards the rear of the building, there will be an expansion of the parking. Currently, there are lots of cars that park parallel along that rear paved access around the back of the building. So this will increase some of the parking slightly, but I think it will more so organize the existing parking that's there, and there will be diagonal parking provided to the rear of the building. To accommodate that additional parking, we'll be pushing the earth slope back up the hill slightly towards the tree line and towards those the utility lines. We have notified PSNH of the work. However, we are not working inside any of their easements, so we do not need any permissions or permits from them. Same with the Wetlands Bureau. We are not proposing any wetlands impact. No permits are needed. And the septic system connection, like I said, we're not expanding the use. So the existing leach field that's out in front, down by the main road, we're not expanding the field. We're only connecting the new building to the existing sewer infrastructure. That has been approved, and we do have the DES permit for the alteration to the existing system. Going back to the parking, along the rear of the school, I noted that there will be additional parking spaces. The diagonal spots, there's actually 13 of them. There's also a turnaround which has been approved by the fire department, so a fire truck can drive all the way to the rear left corner of the addition, and then they would only have to back up that 97 feet. They could do a 3-point turn, and up against the hill, there's a full turn around, almost like a hammerhead, and then they can drive back out. The pavement back there, once the additional paving is done, the remaining paving will be overlaid, so it will basically look like a total new parking area. And the same with the front of the school. We're going to be chewing up those sidewalks pretty good with the installation of the water main and the sewer main. So rather than patching and having a network of patches, the school agreed to remove all of that existing paving along the front for the sidewalks and remove and replace that. So that will be basically an all new sidewalk access as well. We show on the plan some temporary fencing that basically cordons off the rear corner of the school on both sides of the school. And this was all designed before the school was shut down due to the virus that we're all aware of. So the first couple of days when Neville was out there a week or so ago, they had some people that were using the school as a roller skating area and a hiking area, walking area, and it was not safe. So they moved or relocated those construction fences down at the access points by the first, if you want to call it the cul-de-sac. So you can't even get to that parking lot out in front of the school anymore. There are construction fences with signs, road closed, that kind of thing, that have been put up in place for the safety of people who were using the school for that kind of recreation. We attended a TRC meeting a couple months ago. Like I had already mentioned, we received comments from Sarah and Mike over at DPW and Stewart. We received comments from Lee, from the fire department. The building inspector did not specifically comment on much because we did not have the building plans completed yet. We were talking pretty much about the civil design. Building plans have been finalized, and those are going to be, if they haven't already been submitted to the building inspector for a permit. And like I said, that the new addition, even though it's connected, will basically be independent with its own electrical system, water, fire suppression system, and sewer. The fire alarm system will be tied in together with the school, so if the fire alarms or the sprinklers go off in the addition, and they will also be reacted or they will interact with the school system and vice versa, so that will act as one. There is a significant amount of fill. It's basically a decent gravelly sand that's coming out of that slope. And as part of the project, the school board agreed and proposed to truck a bunch of that over to Mountain View Middle School at a pretty good reduced price from Neville, since they were already handling the material and removing it from the site. They agreed to drop it off over there so the school could use it for some future plans for some road widening. After we investigated that pretty significantly, we found it to be it was not going to be cost effective to prepare an area to store that material. So rather than storing it at the Mountain View School, Neville has been trucking it over to the other parcel that the school owns, a vacant piece of land, and they're storing it there instead. And the remainder of the material being removed from the site will be trucked back to John Neville's pit. Currently, all of the erosion control measures are in. There's a nice line of wood chips along the whole wetland. Trees have been cut, and they have been starting the excavation of the soils to accommodate the addition, the parking area, and the new back slope of that site. And we are preparing to come back. I know this is just an informal discussion, so I'd like to keep it short. I know it's getting late. We're coming back, I believe, on the 27th for an actual publicly noticed hearing. And I don't think the 27th is right. What is that date? Is it for the 23rd?
23rd.
23rd. So we'll be back on the 23rd. The notices have been sent out to the abutters, and at that time we'll also provide full-size plans, and we can provide digital copies to whoever needs them for the to be broadcasted if this is still being done remotely as we are tonight.
Well, the 23rd of this, 23rd of this month we're talking about? The
Yeah,
emergency order goes through this month, so we need the PDF. The meeting will be the broadcast and telephonic also. Okay.
Yeah, I sent the PDFs already to the town, so I can
No,
send them to
I
someone
know you
else if we need.
did. That's on us, so I'm aware of that. Okay.
Hey, Barbara, this is Karen speaking. I have to get going.
Okay, thank
My
you.
daughter's not having a good time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Say hi to Chewy.
I will, definitely. Thank you.
All right, bye.
So as I was saying, we'll be back on the 23rd. Notices have gone out to abutters. Again, the only permit we need is the septic permit, which we already have, and we've already met with all the department heads, received comments, addressed all of those. So unless I don't believe I missed anything on the presentation, I'd be glad to field questions or comments from the board members or from the public.
Question or comments from board members?
No, none.
Nope.
Nope, I'm not seeing any. And is anybody even signed in? And we don't have anybody logged in, so, thank you for that overview and that presentation. We've got plans on a lot of details and an overview of the plan of the site, and we'll have that available, in a format so that it can be seen on the broadcast, when we meet again on this. Joanne, is there anything further we need to do on this?
No, nothing. The hearing is going to be advertised. It's just for informational purposes. Comments.
All right.
Or
All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Tim?
I have a question for Joanne. Can you hear me, Joanne?
I can.
Have we heard back from East Point Rentals yet with their landscape plan for where they cut the pine trees down there by the Irving Station?
No, I reached out to them, and the manager that I need to speak with is not there, and I have not heard back. Keep trying. They're still, the buckets are still over the fence on certain days. Certain days are worse than others, but no, I've not heard back.
Well, what got them here the first time? The threat of a site revocation?
But, excuse me, I didn't hear the whole question.
Did we ask them to come in the last time because we were gonna consider revoking their site permit?
Correct.
Well, maybe we should use the same tactic that got them here the last time. Maybe it'll get them back.
Okay.
Tim, what's the difference if you get them back if they're gonna do the same thing?
Well, we need,
I think you gotta add some teeth to it this time, instead of saying, we're gonna do this, but we don't do anything.
well, we gave them an opportunity to do something, and now they haven't followed through. That's my discussion, Peter.
I'm gonna bring it up with the select board on Monday night to take it a different direction.
Okay?
And I was gonna talk to Barbara about it, see if it was okay to do.
Thank you, Peter.
All right, well, in that light, if we can deal with the operation of the business at the corner of 114, 114A, that's been on the table for quite a while, and there's definitely something going on there.
I've seen tow trucks in the back of that building where they may be using that as a tow storage yard.
Right. So something formal needs to happen to that. And so we need a status check on that, and maybe Pete, before your next Board of Selectmen's meeting, you can get an update from planning on what the last action was taken, because something needs to happen with that. Because technically, we don't have a site plan approved for that site. They came in, we gave the approval, we never got final plans to sign, and nothing should be operating there. So there's not like as if there's a site plan to revoke. So something needs to happen.
I'll work on that tomorrow, to have them, to bring to the select board on Monday night, and we'll fill you in what we find out.
All right, thank you. All right, does anybody have any other business to bring before the board tonight?
Just a question, Barbara.
Bill?
On the plan, on the site plan that you talked about, if they don't have a site plan, do they have a CO?
I don't.
No, they do not.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
They do not have a CO. A portion of that property, from what I understand, has been converted back to residential. So I think the house itself is being used as residential, and I don't know what the status of that is.
That, it was a mixed use. There was a business operating in there, and there always was at least one apartment there, in addition to the business.
The business itself does not have a CO. There were some things that he had to meet, which were part of the conditions of approval, and they were never met. And then it just continued.
Right, so the point is, it needs to stop. Tim?
Well, the business should be not even considered, because that was considered an overflow from a prior business, and it was clearly stated that if the other business was to go out of business, that was ceased to exist, and that was in our minutes, as I remember.
It's a site that doesn't have a business approved to operate in any way on it at this point in time.
Right.
So,
It doesn't,
we need, that was supposedly letters were sent, but it is actually looking to me like it's busier than it has been. So, something needs to happen. All right. Phil,
Motion.
that's gotta be you and your clocks. Is that like the sign that the bell is tolling and we need to go?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second,
All right, we have a bunch of seconds. All those in favor, I've gotta do a roll call. Tim?
yay.
I vote yes. Peter?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. We are adjourned.